Hi everybody, we are getting so close to the end. So this is the Count of Monte Cristo, chapter 67, Separation. In the house in the Rue Saint-Germain-des-Prés that Albert de Moncouf had chosen for his mother, the first floor was let to a very mysterious person. The porter himself had never seen this man's face, for in the winter he buried his chin in one of those red kerchiefs worn by coachmen of the nobility, and in the summer he always blew his nose when he passed the porter's lodge. Contrary to custom, he was not watched, and it was reported that he was a man of high standing with a great deal of influence, so that his incognito was respected. His visits were generally regular. At 4 o'clock, winter and summer, he would arrive, and 20 minutes later a carriage drew up at the house. A woman dressed in black or dark blue and always thickly veiled would alight, and, passing by the lodge like a shadow, ran up the stairs so gently that not a stair creaked under the pressure of her light foot. No one ever asked her whither she was going, and no one ever saw her face. Needless to say, she never went higher than the first floor. She tapped at the door in a peculiar way. It was opened to her and then fastened again. They left the house in the same way. The woman went first and was followed 20 minutes later by the unknown man. The day after that on which the Count of Monte Cristo had called on Monsieur Danglars, the day of Valentine's funeral, the mysterious tenant entered his flat at 10 o'clock in the morning instead of his usual hour. Almost immediately afterward, without the usual interval, a hired cab arrived, and the veiled lady quickly ran up the stairs. The door was opened, and before it could be closed again, she called out, "Oh, Lucien! Oh, my dear!" In this way, the porter, who had overheard the exclamation, heard for the first time that his tenant was named Lucien, but that he was a model porter, he decided not even to tell his wife. "Well, what is the matter, dear?" asked he, whose name either trouble or eagerness had forced from the veiled lady's lips. "Tell me quickly." "Can I depend on you?" "You know you can. But what is the matter? Your note of this morning, so hastily and tidily written, has made me feel very anxious." "A great deal has happened," said the lady. "Monsieur Danglars left last night." "Left? Monsieur Danglars left? Where has he gone to?" "I do not know." "How do you mean you do not know? Has he gone away for good?" "No doubt. At 10 o'clock last night, his horses took him to the Sheraton gate, where he found a post-chaise waiting for him. He stepped into it with his valet, telling his coachman that he was going to the Fontainebleau. He left me a letter." "A letter?" "Yes. Read it." And the Baroness took from her pocket an unsealed letter, which she handed to Debray. Before reading it, he hesitated a moment, as though trying to guess its contents, or rather, as though knowing its contents, he was making up his mind what action to take. He had no doubt come to a decision after a second or two, for he read the note which had caused Madame Danglars so much anxiety, and which ran as follows: "Madame and most faithful wife." Debray involuntarily paused and looked at the Baroness, who blushed to the roots of her hair. "Read," she said, and Debray continued. "When you receive this letter, you will no longer have a husband. Oh, you need not be alarmed. You will only have lost him in the same way in which you have lost your daughter. That is to say, I shall be traveling along one of the 30 or 40 roads which lead out of France. I owe you an explanation, and as you are a woman of quick comprehension, I will give it to you. A bill of 5 million francs was unexpectedly presented to me for repayment this morning, which I effected. This was immediately followed by another bill for the same amount. I postpone this payment until tomorrow, and I am going away in order to escape that tomorrow, which would be too unpleasant for me to endure. You understand me, do you not, my most precious wife? I say you understand because you are as conversant with my business affairs as I am myself, in fact more so, for if I had to say what had become of a good half of my fortune, which until recently was quite a considerable one, I should be unable to do so, whereas I am certain that you, on the contrary, would be able to give a very fair answer. Women have infallible instincts, and by means of an algebra unknown to man, they can explain the most marvelous things. I only understand my figures. From the day these figures fail me, I know nothing. I am leaving you, madame and most prudent wife, and my conscience does not reproach me in the least at doing so. You have your friends, and to complete your happiness, the liberty I hasten to restore to you. There is one more observation I should like to make. As long as I hoped you were working for the good of our firm and the fortune of our daughter, I philosophically closed my eyes to all. But since you have brought about the ruin of our firm, I do not wish to serve as a foundation for another's fortune. You were rich when I married you, though little respected. Pardon me for speaking with such frankness, but as this is in all likelihood only between ourselves, I do not see why I should choose my words. I augmented our fortune, and it continued to increase for 15 years, until unexpected and incomprehensible disasters overtook me, and, through no fault of my own, I find myself a ruined man. You, madame, have only sought to increase your own fortune, and I am convinced you have been successful. I leave you then as you were when I married you, rich, though with little honor. Farewell. From today I also shall work for myself. Accept my gratitude for the example which you have set me, and which I intend following. Your very devoted husband, Baron Danglars. The Baroness watched Debray as he read this long and painful letter, and saw that in spite of his self-command, the young man had changed color once or twice. When he had finished reading the letter, he folded it up slowly and resumed his pensive attitude. Well, asked Madame Danglars with very comprehensible anxiety. Well, madame, repeated Debray mechanically, what do you think of that letter? It is quite simple, madame. Monsieur Danglars has gone away full of suspicion. Undoubtedly, but is that all you have to say to me? I do not understand you, said Debray with freezing coolness. He has gone. Gone, never to return. Oh, do not believe that, Baroness. I tell you, he will never return. Had he thought I should be useful to him, he would have taken me with him. He has left me at Paris because our separation would serve his purpose. It is therefore irrevocable, and I am free forever, added Madame Danglars with the same tone of entreaty. But instead of replying, Debray left her in suspense. What? Said she at last. You have no answer. I have but one question to put to you. What do you intend to do? That is what I was going to ask you, replied the Baroness with wildly beating heart. I ask you to advise me. Then I advise you to travel, replied the young man coldly. To travel, murmured Madame Danglars. Certainly. As Monsieur Danglars says, you are rich and perfectly free. It is absolutely necessary for you to leave Paris, at least I think so, after the double scandal of your daughter's rejected marriage and your husband's disappearance. The world must be led to think that you are poor, for opulence in a bankrupt's wife is an unforgivable sin. You have only to remain in Paris for a fortnight, telling everyone that you have been deserted. Relate to your best friends how it all happened, and they will soon spread it abroad. Then you can quit your home, leaving your jewels behind you and giving up your jointure, and then everyone will be singing your praises because of your disinterestedness. It will be known that your husband has deserted you, and it will be thought that you are poor. I alone know your financial situation, and am ready to render you an account as an honest partner. Pale with amazement, the Baroness listened to this discourse with as much despair and terror as Debray had manifested indifference in pronouncing it. Deserted, she repeated. Yes, utterly deserted. You are right, monsieur. Everyone will know that. But you are rich, nay, very rich, continued Debray, taking from his pocketbook some papers which he spread on the table. Madame Danglars suffered him to give her the details of their joint financial transactions, but she did not heed his words. She was fully occupied in stilling the turbulent beating of her heart and in keeping back the tears which she felt rising to the surface. At length her dignity conquered, and though she may not have succeeded in restraining her heart, she at least prevented the fall of a single tear. It was with indifference that she listened as he recounted how he had multiplied their money, for all she wanted was a tender word to console her for being so rich, but she waited in vain for that word. Now, madame, Debray continued, your share amounts to 1,340,000 francs, so that you have a fine income, something like 60,000 francs, which is enormous for a woman who cannot keep up an appearance of wealth, at least not for a year or so. Nevertheless, if this should prove insufficient for your needs, for the sake of the past, I am disposed to offer you the loan of all I possess, that is 1,060,000 francs. Thank you, replied the Baroness. You have already handed over to me far more than is required by a poor woman who intends to live in retirement for some time to come. Debray was astonished for a moment, but he quickly recovered himself and made a gesture which in the most polite manner possible seemed to imply, just as you please. Until that moment, Madame Danglars had hoped for something more. But when she saw Debray's gesture of indifference and the sidelong glance which accompanied it, as well as the profound and significant silence which followed it, she raised her head, opened the door, and calmly and unhesitatingly descended the stairs without even a farewell look at one who could let her leave him in this manner. Debray quietly waited until Madame Danglars had been gone 20 minutes before he made up his mind to leave. And during all this interval, he occupied himself with calculations, his watch by his side. Above the room where Debray had been dividing his 2.5 million francs with Madame Danglars, there was another room in which we shall find friends who have played important parts in the incidents related, friends whose reappearance will cause us pleasure. Mercédès and Albert were there. Mercédès was very much changed in the last few days. Not that even in the height of her fortune she had ever dressed with that display of ostentatious magnificence which renders a woman unrecognizable as soon as she appears in simple attire. Not that she had elapsed into that state of depression in which one feels constrained to put on again the garments of poverty. No, Mercédès had changed because her eyes had lost their sparkle, her mouth its smile, and to complete all, abashment and perplexity ever arrested on her lips that flow of speech which had issued so easily in former days from her ever-ready wit. Poverty had not broken her spirit, and want of courage had not made her poverty appear unendurable to her. Descended from the high position in which she had been living, lost in the new sphere she had chosen like someone passing suddenly from a brilliantly lighted room to utter darkness, Mercédès was like a queen who had stepped from her palace into a hut and could not accustom herself to the earthenware vessel she was obliged to place on the table herself, nor the pallet which had succeeded her bed. In truth, the beautiful Catalan and noble countess had lost her proud look and her charming smile, for her eyes saw nothing but what was distasteful and distressing to her. The walls of her room were hung with a dull gray paper chosen by economical landlords because it would not show the dirt. The floor was uncarpeted. The furniture attracted attention by its poor attempt at magnificence. In fact, everything was so gaudy that it was continual eyesore to anyone accustomed to the refinement and elegance. Madame de Moncouf had lived ever since she had left her magnificent house. The perpetual silence oppressed her, but she knew that Albert was secretly watching her to discover the state of her mind, and this forced her lips into the appearance of an empty smile, which, deprived of the warmth infused to it by her eyes, appeared only like a simple ray of light, that is to say, light without heat. Albert, too, was very moody and ill at ease. The results of a luxurious life hampered him in his present position. When he wanted to go out without gloves, his hands appeared too white. When he wished to go out about the town on foot, his boots appeared too elegant. Yet these two noble and intelligent beings, united by the indissoluble ties of maternal and filial love, had succeeded in tacitly understanding one another. Thus they could face bitter facts without their being preceded by softening words. Albert had been able to say, "Mother, we have no more money," without evoking any visible agitation. Mercédès had never known what real want was. In her youth she had often spoken of poverty, but it is not the same thing, for between want and necessity there is a wide gulf. When she was at the Catalans, Mercédès wanted a number of things, but she was never in need of the necessities of life. As long as the nets were good, they caught fish, and as long as they sold fish, they could mend their nets. Devoid of all friendship, and having but one great affection which did not enter into her material life, she thought of no one but herself, and of nothing but herself. She had managed very well on the little she had, but today there were two to manage for, and she had nothing with which to do it. Winter approached. Mercédès, who had been accustomed to a house heated from the hall to her boudoir, had no fire in her cold, bare room. She, whose house had been one conservatory of costly exotic plants, had not one humble little flower. But she had her son. Hitherto, the excitement of fulfilling a duty, an exaggerated one perhaps, had sustained them, but their enthusiasm had worn off, and they had been compelled to descend from the world of dreams to face stern realities. "Mother, let us count our wealth, if you please. Albert was saying at the precise moment that Madame Danglars was descending the staircase. I must know what it totals before I make my plan. Total? Nothing, said Mercedes with a sad smile. Oh, yes, it is, mother, total. 3,000 francs to begin with. And I dare to hope that with this amount we too shall have a very happy time. Child, said Mercedes. Alas, mother, said the young man, I have unfortunately spent too much of your money not to know the value of it. Look you, 3,000 francs is an enormous sum, and with it I have planned a secure and wonderful future. You may well say that, my son, but in the first place, are we going to accept this money? Said Mercedes, blushing. But I thought we had agreed to that, said Albert in a firm tone. I will accept it all the more readily since we have not got it, for as you know, it is buried in the little garden in the Allée de Milan at Marseille. 200 francs will make the two of us to Marseille. 200 francs? Have you thought it out, Albert? Oh, yes. I have made inquiries with regard to diligences and steamboats, and have made all my calculations. An inside seat in the diligence to Kowloon will cost you 35 francs. You see, mother, I am treating you like a queen. Albert took his pen and wrote, Diligence to Chalon, 35 francs. From Chalon to Lyon by steamboat, 6 francs. From Lyon to Avignon by steamboat, 16 francs. From Avignon to Marseille, 7 francs. Incidental expenses, 50 francs. 114 francs. Let us say 120, added Albert, smiling. Am I not generous, mother? But what about you, my son? Don't you see that I have reserved 80 francs for myself? A young man does not need too much comfort. Besides, I am used to traveling. Do as you like, but where are the 200 francs coming from? Here they are, and 200 more as well. I have sold my watch for 100 francs and the seals for 300. How fortunate that the seals fetched more than the watch. The same story of superfluities again. See how rich we are. Instead of the necessary 114 francs for the journey, you have 250. But we owe something here. 30 francs, which I shall pay out of my 150. With care, I shall only need 80 francs for my journey. So you see, I am wallowing in riches. And it does not end with this. What do you think of this, mother? He took out a small pocketbook with gold clasps, and from it a note for 1,000 francs. What is that? Asked Mercedes. 1,000 francs, mother. Oh, it is perfectly genuine. But whence have you obtained then? Listen to what I have to say, mother, and do not get too agitated. He went up to his mother and kissed her on both cheeks. Then he paused a moment to look at her. You have no idea how beautiful you are to me, said the young man with deep feelings of filial love. You are truly the most beautiful and noblest woman I have ever seen. I shall never be unhappy so long as I have my son, replied Mercedes, vainly endeavoring to keep back the tears which would rise to her eyes. Just so, but this is where our trial begins, said Albert. Mother, do you know what we have decided? Have we decided anything? Yes. We have agreed that you shall live at Marseille while I go to Africa, where I shall win the right to the name I have adopted in the place of one I have cast aside. I have joined the Safias yesterday, or rather, I thought that as my body was my own, I could sell it. Yesterday, I took the place of another, and I sold myself for more than I thought I was worth. He continued, trying to smile. That is to say, for 2,000 francs. So these 1,000 francs, inquired Mercedes, trembling. It is half the amount, mother. How will she receive the other in half a year? Mercedes raised her eyes to heaven with an expression which it would be impossible to describe, and the tears lurking in her eyes overflowed with the power of her emotions and silently ran down her cheeks. The price of his blood, she murmured. Yes, if I am killed, mother, said he, laughing. But I assure you I shall sell my life dearly, for never has it been so precious to me as now. Besides, why should I be killed? Has l'amour been killed? Or Changarnier? Or yet again, Morel, whom we know? Think of your joy, mother, when I come back dressed in my embroidered uniform. I must own that I shall look splendid in it, and that I chose this regiment from pure vanity. Though Mercedes attempted to smile, she could not repress a sigh. This devoted mother felt it was wrong of her to let the whole weight of the sacrifice fall upon her son. Well, mother, you understand that this means that you have a sure 4,000 francs, continued Albert, and you can live on that for 2 years at least. Do you think so? Replied Mercedes mechanically, but in tones of such deep sorrow that the real sense of the words did not escape Albert. He felt his heart grow heavy, and taking his mother's hand, he said tenderly, "Oh yes, you will live." "Then you must not leave me, my son." "Mother, I must go," said Albert in a calm but firm voice. "You love me too much to let me stay idle and useless with you. Besides, I have signed the agreement." "Do as you will, my son." "I shall do God's will." "It is not as I will, mother, but according to the dictates of common sense and necessity. We are two despairing creatures, are we not? What is life to you today? Nothing. What is it to me? Worth very little without you. Mother, I assure you, but I will live if you promise not to give up hope, and in permitting me to care for your fixture, you give me double strength. Out there in Algeria, I shall go to the governor, who is a noble-hearted man and essentially a soldier, and shall tell him my story and entreat him to interest himself in me. Then, mother, I shall either be an officer within 6 months or else dead. If I am an officer, your future is assured, for I shall have money enough for you and for me, and in addition, a name of which we shall both be proud, for it will be your own name. If I am killed, then, mother dear, you also will die, and our misfortunes and sorrows will have an end." "As you wish," replied Mercedes with a noble and eloquent glance. "But you must have no morbid thoughts, mother," exclaimed the young man. "I assure you we can be very happy. Then it is settled that we separate. We can even begin from today. I will go and procure your ticket. But what about yours? I must stay on here 2 or 3 days longer. It will accustom us to our separation, and I have to gather some information on Africa, and also I want some introductions before I join you at Marseille." "Well then, let us go," said Mercedes, wrapping round her the only shawl she had taken away with her, which happened to be a valuable black cashmere one. "Let us go." Albert quickly gathered up his papers, rang for the portier, and paid him the 30 francs owing. Then he gave his arm to his mother, and they descended the stairs. Someone was going down from in front of them, who, on hearing the rustling of a silk dress against the balustrade, turned round. "Debray," murmured Albert. "You, Moncouf," replied the minister's secretary, standing still. Then, noticing the semi-darkness, the veiled and still figure of Madame de Moncouf, "Oh, pardon," he said with a smile. "I will leave you, Albert." Albert understood his thoughts. "Mother," said he, turning toward Mercedes, "this is Monsieur Debray, secretary to the Minister of the Interior and a former friend of mine." "Former?" stammered Debray. "Why do you say that?" "I say that, Monsieur Debray, because today I have no more friends and must not have any," replied Albert. "I thank you, monsieur, for having acknowledged me." Debray went up 2 stairs and cordially shook Albert's hand as he said with all the feeling of which he was capable, "Believe me, I have felt deep sympathy with you in the misfortune that has befallen you, and if I can serve you in any way, pray call on me to do so." "Thank you, monsieur," said Albert, smiling, "but in the midst of our misfortune we are still rich enough to require no outside help. We are leaving Paris, and after our traveling expenses are paid, we shall still have 5,000 francs. The color rose to Debray's cheeks as he thought of the 1,000,000 francs he had in his pocketbook, and, unimaginative though he was, he could not help reflecting that a few minutes back there were in that house 2 women, the one jointly dishonored, having left with 1,500,000 francs under her cloak, while the other one, unjustly smitten, yet superb in her misfortune, considers herself rich with a few francs. This parallel disturbed his politeness. The philosophy of the example overwhelmed him. He stammered a few words of general courtesy and quickly ran down the stairs. The minister's clerks, his subordinates, had to suffer from his ill humor the rest of the day. In the evening, however, he consoled himself by becoming the owner of a splendid house in the Boulevard de la Madeleine, yielding an income of 50,000 francs. About 5 o'clock the next evening, at the very moment when Debray was signing the agreement, Madame de Moncouf entered the diligence after tenderly kissing her son and being as tenderly embraced by him, and was driven away. A man was hidden behind an arched window in Laffitte's offices. He saw Mercedes enter the diligence, watched the conveyance drive away, and saw Albert turn back. Then he passed his hand across his wrinkled forehead, saying to himself, "Alas, by what means can I restore these 2 innocent beings the happiness I have snatched from them? God will help me." So Mercedes is back to Marseille, Albert is off to Africa, and selfish people got what selfish people deserve. I'll see you next time.